KGRA Digital Broadcasting and Pop Culture Minefield presents Dangerous Military Nerds. Dangerous Military Nerds. They're just like regular nerds, only dangerous. And now, your hosts, Don Ecker and Gary Cassell.
So he always says Gary Cassell. Now, I pronounced it Kissel and Cassell. What's correct?
It's Cassell because I have two L's. If you have a double consonant in the middle of a name, followed by a vowel and then another double consonant, the vowel is soft. And so it's Cassell. There are Kissels
we fucking
in our family.
Smart.
The
Aren't
Pennsylvania,
we smart?
Yeah, those of us from Pennsylvania are two L's. The New York side of the family is one L, and so they're called the Kissels. Which the famous story of the Kissel brothers, the mystery about their deaths. But anyway, I do want to give this warning. This is the PG warning.
Warning. The following program involves discussions between military veterans. As such, it is almost guaranteed that there will be coarse language and crude subject matter. So if the words piss, fuck, cock, cunt, and shit offend you, this might not be the place for you. Otherwise, enjoy.
Yeah, it doesn't have the last part. I've got to get Mac to do a new one. Anyway, we've got a very special guest. He's been here before. Is my good buddy Michael Carrasquillo. I'm sorry, Martin. How do I pronounce that correctly? How do you do that?
Carrasquillo.
And he's
You
like,
weren't even fucking close, dude.
Michael's backstage pointing at him like, he's got it. He's got it. So, folks, here he is. A good friend of mine. I've known him for a while as Michael.
Glad to be here, I think.
I love you, man. You're such a good dude. You really are. I'm glad to have you in my life. That's all I got to say. I wish you were in my life a little more, but, you know, you got a woman, so I get it.
We're going there? Okay. I mean, if that's where we're going to take this conversation.
Well, someday Gary may have one too. We don't know.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe.
I wasn't prepared for this conversation, but all right, let's go.
I love you because you're a nerd like me, dangerous nerd. You're a dangerous nerd, my friend. And just found out you do play Call of Duty. We've got to get connected on Call of Duty and play.
Absolutely.
I like playing with my friends on Call of Duty. Trying to get
That's fun
because you haven't met Keith yet, and one day you're going to meet him. He's a big Call of Duty guy, and we've yet to get him to join us on Xbox. Or now it's cross-platform.
That's right.
I use BattleNet. Warzone, and I get on there and I can play any version of Call. I have all of the Call of Duties.
Yeah,
even the one that sucks. That Vanguard, what a terrible game. Did you try that one?
Oh yeah. I've every Call of Duty since. I mean, God, I can't even remember as far back as the first one I started playing. But yeah, for one of my favorites was no, that wasn't Call of Duty. What was the airborne one? That was
Medal of Honor Airborne.
Medal of Honor Airborne. Like
that's what
I remember.
Yeah, Dale, my boss worked on those.
Oh man, that was I love that game. But yeah, no man, I've been obviously being a military guy, being a gamer, being a huge nerd. I've played just about every game from past, present, and future.
I'm assuming you played Battlefield and Bad Company.
Of course, Battlefield Bad Company.
Did you have problems with it like I did?
No, I don't know. I just, I mean, I guess it depends what you mean by problems. I mean,
I didn't like the action, the movement.
Okay.
I had problems with the movement and the weapon action. I didn't like it. Call of Duty is closer to more real in the weapon movement and your movement. I just like it better.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt anybody. For me, being somebody who was in the infantry and being somebody who was, like to me, it's not equating the same thing. It's like, if you were if you were a farmer and you're like, well, I don't think Farming Simulator really captures like, yeah, it's not the same thing. You know what I mean? Like it's so like I enjoyed just the pure entertainment of it and the skill of it and the, you know what I mean? Just the brevity of it. But I mean, realistically, none of these games are really like combat.
No, the U.S. Army game was pretty good. It was
surprisingly,
America's Army,
yeah.
Because even with Call of Duty, I'll play with other veteran buddies. I was in a clan. We were all veterans, and we would use proper CQB, and we were just killing it in that game using proper stuff. But then you get these guys, and my problem with Call of Duty today is it's cosplay Call of Duty. You get these people run around like it's that other game that I won't play, that Fat Steven Seagal. Fortnite. What a dumb game. It's like I told Steven, "Could you join me?" I went, "I'll let you know when I'm that gay."
Sure.
But I don't know. Call of Duty, I enjoy playing. I just wish there was a less of the cosplay in there. Like right now, they've got the characters from the boys.
Yeah, from the boys.
And I am enjoying killing them. I am just killed the shit out of a bunch of them.
A buddy of mine just every time a new skin comes out, so we were just busting on him because we're playing, you know, you got your tactical guy and the helmet and thing. And I got fucking Homelander standing next to me.
Homelander's standing next to you. And he
like,
says
dude,
lines too. He says lines in the game. It's just like, what the fuck?
Man. But no, funny enough, man, last night on my show, I just had the CEO and founder of Victora Games, the company behind 6 Days in Fallujah. So he was on the show last night, and we talked for an
original animators for the game, and it got canceled because of moms of the actual vets, and because they didn't like the idea that in the live version somebody could play the bad guys. And I'm like, that happens in. Are you kidding me?
That's life.
You know, and so the game got canceled, and then this company came forward and took that original game and redid the whole thing. And I bought it, by the way. I have a copy.
That's great.
And the problem is I got it through StreamYard, or I'm sorry, Steam.
Yeah.
And Steam, it's giving me trouble using my controller because I play by controller.
Same. I play controller. Yeah. Even on PC.
For some reason, it's not recognizing my controller. So
why do you do that to yourself?
Because
mouse and keyboard is the way.
No, if you came up doing it, I didn't do that. I played games.
Some of us have nerve damage in our hands and aren't able to, you know, I can't.
Like my right hand's fucked up too, but not like yours. I mean, you got shot, dude.
The accessibility
By the way,
features
in the film strip I created of your photos, I left out the graphic photos.
I figured,
even though I'm sure you were comfortable with it, I didn't know if the audience would deal with it well.
It's the smart play. Yeah.
I showed 2 images from your surgeries. And it looked like the same doctors, but different. They were working on different parts. So I wasn't sure if it's the same surgery. Yeah. And was it separate surgeries?
So, I mean, well, I've had in the first 2 years since my injury, I had 44 different surgeries. But a lot of those images that you saw were literally, within an hour of me being shot, I was on a table.
Yeah, it looked like a cash unit.
Yep. And we were right there. It was a little mud hut on the flight line. And they were, you know, performing life-saving surgeries to you know, pull the bullets out and to patch me up as best they could.
Yeah, I saw that one photo of the and you know, as a medic, none of it phases me, but I could just imagine the pain you were going through because I saw the open wound of your knuckle.
Oh yeah,
and I'm like, Jesus Christ, I know there's a lot of nerves there.
Yeah. No, I think the most painful one, honestly, was actually the one that came out my back. That was
through and through, right?
Yeah, it went actually like up through my armpit, hit my clavicle, and then came out my back, and it left a rather large hole. And like, so I think one of the pictures you see is when they're looking at my back. And that's after they had stitched it like 75% closed, and it's still a good because it has to heal from the inside.
Yeah,
you can't just seal it, otherwise
and they can't pack it either. They can only cover it. and allow the skin, because skin, people don't know, that goes this way in the healing process.
Yep.
It doesn't heal up here downward.
Yep.
It starts from the base and works its way up.
Yeah.
And
so people said that you could look in the hole and basically see like the back of where my shoulder used to be, because it wasn't there anymore. But you could like see into the cavity of my shoulder. So yeah, good stuff. Great for an anatomy lesson,
So let's get into it. I want to, what inspired you to go into the Army?
Oh, that's easy. I'm originally from New York City, and I was a senior in high school when 9/11 happened. And so that pretty much punched my ticket. I'd never thought of joining the military prior. I did have an uncle who had served, and a grandpa, but he wasn't really grandpa, but who had served, many years before. But really, the military wasn't a construct in my mind growing up in the city. I really, to understand like where I came from, Spanish Harlem, poor, teenage mom, no dad. So to understand in those circumstances, like you're not thinking about like, oh, I want to serve my country, because like you're on the bottom rung of the fucking societal totem pole. And the guys that made it were like the managers at McDonald's. Like that guy made it. You know what I mean? Like that was the high life of coming out of the ghetto like that. And so I didn't really know what I was going to do post high school. And then 9/11 happened, and obviously, became a big push of enlistment and things like that. And it just kind of fell into place that this is what I needed to do. This was an attack on my home.
Were you out for justice or revenge, or what was it? What was your driving?
I think it was honestly, it was a mix. It was a mix. There was a very large, I'd lie to say if there wasn't a big part of it going like, this was a personal attack and I wanted to get mine kind of thing. And then another part of it was just like, this was just an avenue that I'd never realized was an opportunity. And so it just seemed like a really good way to get myself out of kind of the ghetto, and provide a better life for me. And, obviously you get paid, you travel the world, the old adages of like, why the military is so great. And, like college was never a thing for me. Like that was never on the horizon for me. So, mostly it was, going to get some, and then, just as an opportunity to kind of escape where I came from.
Good mixture. It's a good mixture, and I get that. Because Don was a volunteer in Vietnam, and like my cousin Gomer, and Don, like you, both of you are recipients of the Purple Heart, and in fact, Don is a member of the Audie Murphy created it, right? Or was it created in his name, Don?
No, it was the Military Order of the Purple Heart chapter in Hollywood, and Murphy helped start that chapter. And I was, at one point, I was the commander of the Hollywood chapter. And that's another story in itself. We had a couple of assholes who had been in charge before, were draining the funds. I created a stank. I demanded that National come out and have an investigation. It was just a freaking mess. But it's like everything else. You got a-holes in every
everywhere you go.
Everywhere
you're gonna find them. Fucking assholes that are ruining it for everybody.
Yeah.
So I talk about
that. I wasn't somebody to sit around and keep my mouth shut.
No way.
It's good. We need more people like that.
Yes, we do. Don is an essential person. He doesn't take shit off anybody. He's also from the East Coast too. So
Pennsylvania, dude.
Yeah, Pennsylvania. He's got the accent if you can pick it up. He says things like huge, huge. But the things I wanted to get into, because I made notes today, because I like to have little notes every once in a while. And one thing I wanted to ask is, what was basic training like for you, man? And where'd you go?
Yes, I went to Fort, as all the infantry guys out there, Fort Benning, Georgia, which is not, it's not Fort Benning anymore, right? It's like Fort Liberty or something like that. I don't know. They changed
the
all the
PC
names.
people like changing names.
So Fort Benning, Georgia, as it was in my time, January of 2003. So when I actively started my wonderful military career. And as far as how it was for me, I was not prepared in the least. I luckily I was in decent shape, so that wasn't too bad. But never in my life had I run as part of exercise. Like it, because I had wrestled for a little bit and a little bit, I guess football, but like this idea of like just kind of running in laps and things like that is just something I'd never really done. So I didn't know how to like run the right way. For those that don't understand, like, you grow up in the ghetto, it's like you're either running from the cops or you're running from gunfire. It's a different kind of running. So this idea of like running in formation, I'd never done anything like that. It was a big leap for me because growing up in the inner city, like for me, the woods was Central Park. Like that's the
right.
It's really what it was.
It is where there are woods in Central Park you can get lost in.
That's
true.
it. That's exactly it.
Big.
And so this concept of like the forest really didn't exist for me. And call it what you will, poor public education, whatever. I really, and I mean this in the dumbest way possible, I believed everywhere in the world was like New York City. Everything was a big, sprawling metropolis with subways.
God save us.
Yeah, the shows I watched were all like that. The cartoons I watched were all like that. They're all big cities. So, like, if you had showed me a picture of, like, at the time, I don't know, West Virginia or Pennsylvania, I would have been like, oh, right, from the 1800s. Yeah. Like, back when there were trees everywhere. Like, I didn't understand the concept that New York is its own, I mean? I'd never left the city. I didn't, again, very poor education. So going to something like Fort Benning, Georgia, and spending the majority of the time in the woods and in the swamps and it was.
What date did your cycle start too?
January 15th, 2003.
Oh, so it was cold. Okay,
it was cold.
You didn't have a shitty summer time.
Yeah, I remember my first experience. Like we were doing a ruck march, and they would do these drills of like incoming fire. You have to like dive into the ditch and everything.
Was it a force march?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's always a force march. Everything's force march. But like I remember my first experience with like a fire anthill. No concept of what that is, and I took a header right through one. Lessons learned, and yeah. I mean, it was all new and foreign to me, man. It was crazy. It was crazy. We at the end of it, you do this FTX where I think you're out in the woods for 7 days, right? And you're training out there and you're living out there. And I didn't shit once because I just couldn't. I could not bring myself to go find an area, dig a hole, and shit in it. So I went. I literally, people think I'm joking. I'm not joking. I went 7 days eating, didn't shit once, and absolutely.
That's a good way to kill yourself.
Yeah. It was not. I don't recommend it.
Especially if you're eating MREs.
Yeah, I didn't. It's not like it wasn't a conscious choice, really. It's just I like my brain was just like, no, you're not going to. You're just not. But yeah, so it was a bit of a learning curve, I'd say, was the answer and how it went. Bit of a learning curve.
Yeah. Look, I've lived in Georgia. I know how shitty it can get down there in the summer. So I'm glad you actually went in the winter. Winter's not that bad. I enjoyed that. But where did you go to AIT?
So for us in the infantry, when you graduate basic, AIT is just it's literally just an extended basic. So like you finish,
so
you get a weekend pass, and then Monday you're right with the same people.
Better. I think that's better because I didn't like the way we did it. We did basic at Fort Leonard Wood, aka Fort Lost in the Woods, and then we got bused down to San Antonio to do AIT there for medic training.
Yeah.
And I could not believe how many of the guys from Basic went with me. I was like, holy shit, all you guys? I'm like, great. I keep all my friends. Awesome. But I will tell you, I don't know about you. The first time you do the what do you call it? The course where you get to run over objects, the obstacle course. Yeah. First obstacle course, I actually fucked with one of the drill instructors as we were going through the obstacle course. I was going over the log, and he's sitting on the end of the log, looking down the lane. And I stop, I pause, and I looked at him. And there's, that when you can always tell when someone's looking at you peripherally. And he turned and locked eyes with me, and I screamed at him, "This is nothing like Stripes." And then I kept going. I could hear him laughing behind me. Going, "What the fuck?"
Yeah. Hey, you
what was that like for you?
Much ballsier than me. I was terrified of my drill sergeants. I spoke to them as little as possible. Yeah.
I was 26 when I went in.
Oh,
I wasn't scared of any of them.
You want to hear a real horse story, Mike?
Go for it.
I'll tell you about my drill sergeant in basic training, and I took it, by the way, at Dick's.
Fort Dixieland.
His name was Richard Reeder. Okay. And as it turned out, the first thing when he gathered the platoon together, he asked, "Is there anybody here from Altoona, Pennsylvania?" Well, I was. That was my hometown. So like a dumbass, I put my hand up and I said, "Yeah, okay." Well, that was bad because he was from Tyrone, Pennsylvania, just down the road. Big rivalry between the two towns. But that wasn't the half of it. He had dropped out of high school in 1967, went into the Army, went to Nam, came back. When he came back, he was a staff sergeant, went to drill sergeant school. And as it turned out, I shit you not, my aunt was an English teacher that had taught at Tyrone, and she had that son of a bitch in her class. And according to her, he was a real shitbird. But when he found that out, oh my God, was my life made miserable. True freaking story. True story.
Yeah, that would be a nightmare. Now, do you remember during basic, did they do this with you where they have the hats off moment right at the very beginning to get to know everybody?
Like to get to know the drill sergeants?
It's in the barracks for us. We sat around in one of the big, what do you call it? The storage rooms.
Like the bay.
And they had seats and bunks in there, but nobody used it. And we're all sitting in there and, hats off. We're just all talking. He's like, "Who are you? Where are you from?" And I was just like really thrown off by this shit because I just figured it was going to be nonstop fucking drill sergeant all the way. But this is one of those peaceful moments. Did you get one of those?
We had, it was a couple weeks into it because the first 2 weeks are basically meant for them to like break you down as a human.
Yeah, it was weird that they did that with us the first fucking day.
Yeah, because typically you want them, you want to be intimidated by the drill
sergeant. Yeah, you want to be intimidated.
You want to be terrified of these guys. So they did that for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I remember, like you said, just one day he comes in and we're all like shaking because we were terrified of this guy. And he's like, "All right, everybody just sit down." And he did the very like sitcom-y where like took the chair, turned it backwards and sat on it.
Like Sergeant Hulka from Stripes.
Yeah. And he's like, "All right, let's see. So I'm from Tennessee originally." And we're like, "What the fuck is happening right now?"
I know, it's like mind fucking.
Yeah. So it was weird, but that was the point where they do the heart-to-heart stuff. And it's
hard to imagine them doing that after they've done the frenzy.
Yeah.
Because I know you experience it. Every grunt experiences it. The frenzy where get off my truck.
The shark attack. That's what we used to call it. The shark attack, where they just swarm on people and just the knife hand right into your.
I just remember I met this guy named Condon, Condon, and he told me his name. He said, "What's your name?" I said, "Kissel." "What's yours?" He goes, "Condon." I went, "Are you serious?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Keep away from me, man. You're fucked." and I wanted nowhere near me.
Yeah.
He was. They messed with him so bad. I'm like, what a. Of course, you know what they called him, prophylactic condom. It was terrible. But so how was basic for you before you went to AIT?
No, it was an adjustment. It was an adjustment for sure. But it's one of those things where you
Did they
just
have the
kind
yellow
of
cards for you guys?
no. Well before, there was any kind of yellow cards, or like I hear these people talking about the safe spaces and
Safe
the
space and
stress
stress card.
cards and all that
What
stuff.
a
Yeah, the yellow
crock
card
of
is the
shit.
stress card.
Yeah,
Well,
no.
they started that in the 90s. They didn't have it with you?
No.
Maybe it depends on the post where they're trading.
It could, but yeah, I mean, shit, I wish they had stress cards with me because they kept us very well stressed. I remember, because obviously I joined post 9/11 and very soon after 9/11, and I never forget, we get there and the drill sergeant was like, look, this isn't a question of like, we need to prepare you if you go to war. You're going to war, like, period, flat out. There is no question. You will be among the first to like you're the first class basically going through that. You are guaranteed to go to war. And so they just from day one, they were like, it is our job to prepare you for the vigors of war. Like, and they put us through hell. They put us through absolute hell. And even that wasn't enough,
Did they
man.
try to scare the shit out of you and tell you that you might go straight out of basic?
I mean, I basically did go straight out of basic. My story goes basic, AIT, advanced infantry, airborne, got to my unit 2 weeks later, I'm jumping into combat. So
That's crazy, dude. That is fast.
I went to I had been in combat by the end of my first tour. The majority of my military career, I had been in combat by the end of my first tour, because I'd only had 2-3 months prior to, and then I spent 15 months in combat. So
that's ridiculous. Because I know, like, when I went in, they threatened us with it, and they made a huge mistake for some of us because we wanted to go. That's why I volunteered. And so they were like threatening us right from basic. They'll send you straight down Louisiana, Texas, to do some advanced training down there temporarily, and then ship your ass over the middle. So I said, "Can we volunteer for this?" They're like, "What?"
I mean, yeah, that's kind of what it is. I mean, at that time, it's exactly what it was.
And some of it was in Arizona too. I heard some of them were training in Arizona. Because they were preparing you for the desert is what they're trying to do, and because that's where you were going. And but I ended up, being alert and then activated and then not going, and it just bummed me out. And I got mad because somebody said, "Well, you didn't get deployed," and I'm like, "Going fuck you." The DoD makes that decision, not us. I was there, ready to go. And they didn't send me, and it broke my heart.
Yeah,
So a lot of my buddies went.
Yeah, a lot of people that haven't served don't really understand that there are some jobs where you'll be afforded an opportunity to volunteer, right? There are, I know plenty of guys that were in different rotations.
Like our company had 2 people that got to go join another unit over in Iraq, and well, technically Saudi Arabia, Riyadh is where our unit was.
Gentlemen, we have this question here.
Is the military still a 4-year term? No, it's 4 years active, 4 years inactive. It's usually 8 years total.
Yeah, I mean, the way it works, and I'm fortunate that I've mentored a lot of people still going in. In fact, 4 of my wife's youngest brothers and sisters are in the Air Force right now. Typically, when you sign a contract, yes, you're regardless of the amount of time active, you are signing an 8-year contract that basically says if the military needs you. But typically, the shortest contract is about 4 years. But you can sign 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can sign as much as you want. The more you sign, the happier they are. Yeah.
And then after 8 years, you have to re-up.
Yeah.
And
Mike, did they rate you 100%?
I mean, we're jumping ahead, yes, but yes, I am 100%.
Just curious.
Oh yeah.
And he's 100% with everything now. That's just Michael.
Yeah, but I got 100% before I even joined. I had a predetermined 100%.
Yeah.
No,
And of course, what we're talking about, what Don's talking about, is disability with the military. Like my buddy Robert, he came out, he was 40%, and then each year as it progressively got worse, he's now at close to 80% disability.
He should be
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
He should see somebody in one of the service organizations, DAV, VFW, something
I'll tell
like
him
that,
that.
and they
I'll
can
tell him
probably get him up
Oh, absolutely.
to 100.
Yeah, I can tell you a crazy story in mine, in that, you know, I got wounded. I spent 2 years in the hospital. I died twice. They had to bring me back twice. 44 surgeries.
We
while I
got
was
that
in-
in
You and
common.
Don, you got that in common. Don died too. They had to revive
we
him.
had, you know, so I had 44 surgeries, and eventually after 2 years in the hospital, got medically retired. And right before I was medically retired, you know, they're going through my paperwork, and they're going through they call it the med board and all these things, and to out process you as a medical discharge. And originally my paperwork came back, and the military said, hey, you're worth, you know, 30%. Your injuries are worth 30%, which for how badly I was injured seems ridiculous. But at the time, I didn't know any better. I was, you know, heavily medicated, to say the least. And so I went to sign it. Like, yes, I approve, I accept, whatever. Apparently, and I still don't know how this happened, but instead of checking the box, you know, that I accept, I had checked the box I do not accept, like I don't accept this rating. And so when I sent it back, you know, it took a couple weeks, and all of a sudden it comes back and they go, well, you know, as I'm looking at the paperwork, it goes, you know, we've reviewed your case, you know, and upon review, you were right. We're going to rate you 90%. And I just was like, whoa, that's a very large difference for something that, you know, basically I didn't even realize I was doing. And obviously, once I left the military, I went, you know, and registered with the VA. They said, hey, let's look at your paperwork. And they're like, oh, that's ridiculous. You're easily 100. And ever since then, I've been 100%. So, but it just goes to show you that, I mean, how they rate these things and all that. Like, you know, I tell people all the time, be your best advocate, because yeah, there's who knows how they make these decisions and things. And yeah, I ended up going from
the fact
30
is,
to
sometimes
Well,
you gotta
they'll
fight.
short stroke you every
They
chance
will.
they
You
get.
have to
Yeah.
fight them because the first thing they do to us, because I got injured doing temporary duty, and they're like, if you've got any medical claims, go and claim it now, but we're not going to ship you back. You'll have to stay here. And they're doing that to get you to not make a claim. The Army does this all the time. It's just disgusting. So I know what you're talking about, and yeah, Don's absolutely right. Let's start this film strip over again. Let's get with this. Like, what is this in there for?
That's a good buddy of mine. So it was one of my best friends in the military. He's the black hat that's with the clipboard. That's William
cap,
Keene. Yeah, William Keene. He's the black hat. This is airborne school. So he after a couple combat deployments, he became an instructor at airborne school, which is why they wear the black cap. And then that was with one of the, I forget who it was at the time, one of the big wigs, and then obviously George Bush.
George W. Bush, right?
And so I was just so proud of my buddy that I was like, I got to post this picture, man. He's a good dude, man, and I wanted to, you know, show him some love. And then
what is going on here? That's a Humvee with a mounted 50, isn't it?
That's not the 50. That's a Mark 19. So
really?
That's the automatic grenade launcher.
Which is, my God, those things are amazing.
Yeah, they're so much fun, and that's also like on the where the porthole is now. That's I think that was the rocket launcher too. That was strapped to the side.
Now,
Yeah,
it looks like it's cabled. So did they get that back?
Sort of. It was less about getting the vehicle back, but all the equipment that was inside of it that got washed away
Right.
was a whole nother story. Yeah. The long and short of that is we had been driving through this one desolate area in Afghanistan, and usually very dry area. And then we had unusually large amounts of rain one week, and a lieutenant, in his infinite wisdom, was like, look, we drive through here all the time. Water can't be that deep. And just gun it. And
Famous last words.
So you
Yeah.
fucked around and found out, did you?
yeah, that was the first vehicle, and we just saw it go, and then we just saw it disappear. And the guys jumped out, and obviously, and that was a bad
Now,
situation. I mean, we
the
had some.
Humvees with the snorkels will survive that shit.
I mean, depending on how deep, yeah. But the entire engine was submerged, so there's engines aren't meant to run underwater. You know, ask the guys at Ocean Gate. Oh, so that was a bad day. There was helicopters had to get involved, and it was a whole thing. But yeah, I was just glad I was
Did you
at
guys
that time. I was a
have fear for your
driver.
careers?
Luckily it wasn't it wasn't my vehicle, thank God. But I was a driver at that time, and I was like a third or fourth vehicle back, and I was just like, man, I'm glad that's one of those where you're like, man, it sucks for you, but man, thank God it's not me, because
My reserve unit was the first unit to get Humvees, and the first reserve unit, not Army, but reserve unit. And my first sergeant, he had an accent like this. He talked like this. And he's like bragging about the Humvee, and you cannot get it stuck. I said, I can get it stuck. He goes, you cannot get it stuck. And I went, I could get it stuck. And he goes, you cannot get it stuck. So I looked at it as a challenge. So I pulled off and veered down a 15-degree grade on both sides, and I pinned it.
Yeah, those things broke down constantly.
And I'm like, well, you challenged me.
Yeah, they broke down constantly.
Well, you had the O-rings on yours too, right? I'm assuming
to
keep your speed under control.
Yep. So I remember that this was in Iraq. This was during the time when the nation got very concerned because they found out we were driving in basically aluminum body with vinyl doors.
Proper armor.
Yeah, so we had no armor. We had literally no armor. That was probably one of the most up armored, and that's just aluminum. Like that's nothing. But like
that's when they started sending American citizens were sending armor.
Yes, that's right. And so at one point, I remember we had to bring our vehicle in, and they said, "Hey, you're going to be getting all these up armor conversions." And for whatever reason, like the body kit wasn't ready yet, but they're like, "Hey, we got the engine," which was like just a fucking supercharged. It was like a jet engine, because once you put the up armor on, it is extremely heavy. So you have to have a very powerful engine. So for whatever reason, they swapped out the engine first, and they're like, yeah, come back next week for the armor. And let me tell you something, when we got that new engine in, we were flying. We were doing like 88 down back roads. And the funny thing is, we became much harder to shoot at. Because
the faster you move, the harder you're hit.
It was a lot harder. We literally drove through a few IEDs.
Those first engines, though, Michael, were not very well designed.
No,
the cooling system on them, you would hit 55, and then every 10 minutes, the engine had to cool down. Mm-hmm. And so when it started the cooling process, you would drop to about 40 miles an hour. And they weld these O-rings under the gas pedal that wouldn't allow you to floor it, because they were worried about the engines blowing. Is really what it was.
Yeah.
And but those original engines, I got to tell you, are easier to PMCS than the ones you got, because those engines, they were beasts, and they really did. They turned the Humvee into an actual vehicle.
They always went with the lowest bid.
Always.
Sons of bitches.
Every time I see those commercials like military grade, I'm like, oh shit, then I'm not buying that.
I'm not buying that.
Military grade. I know what military grade means. That means you're on your own.
Fucking bitter. So let's get into your first day of deployment. You're flown over. I'm assuming you flew to Europe and then down, right?
So I was stationed in Italy. That's where my base was. So that's where I was starting from Italy. And then from there we flew into, oh God, what was it? Kuwait? Yeah, it would have been Kuwait.
Common place, Kuwait.
Yeah.
Kuwait or Saudi.
Yeah, it was Kuwait. And then from there we flew into Iraq on my first deployment. Yeah.
When I say Saudi, I mean Riyadh. Riyadh is the other friendly place. So Riyadh and Kuwait.
Really friendly, Gary? Really?
I got to tell you, we didn't trust the Turks when I was there. I was told not to trust any of them, because the typical attitude is they'll be nice to you, doesn't mean they like you.
Yeah. Yeah. You learn that a lot in combat. The difference between like polite and friend is very different. No, yeah. So flew in Iraq, and the first couple days were weird for me only because, I mean, the short version of the story is that when I got to Italy, that unit had just deployed to Iraq. So, all the majority of the guys are already over there. So when I got sent forward a few weeks later, these guys had already gone through firefights. They'd already lost people. They'd already, they were part of the initial invasion in 2003 into Iraq. And so even being in Italy, I wasn't attached to anyone yet. They were like, yeah, we're going to send you forward. They're going to put you where you need to be. So I flew into Iraq, again, not really attached to anybody. I walk off the plane, and I remember they're like, okay, you guys go over there, you guys go over there. And that's how they basically separated the battalions. Like, okay. And then so now I'm part of the 1st and the 508th Airborne Infantry. And then, they're like, hey, you two over here, you two over here. Okay, you're now ACO, you're now BCO. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'm Alpha Company. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm figuring out who I belong to. And they're like, okay, cool. Get on this truck that's going to take you to where Alpha Company is. Because we were in Kirkuk, or Tikrit. No, we were in Kirkuk. And then like Alpha Company's area of, where they're working was like Tikrit. So basically I had to take a truck, and I was on a truck for like a day to end up where Alpha Company was. And I get to Alpha Company, and they're like, all right, you're the new guy. Great. Like, all right, there's like 4 of us. All right, you're going to be 1st platoon. You're going to be 2nd platoon. You're going to be 3rd platoon. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'm with 2nd platoon. And they're like, yeah, get on this truck. It's going that way. And in 8 hours, you'll be to where, 2nd platoon is. Like, oh, okay, cool. So then I hop on another truck. And I just remember I was getting like, for what felt like I was getting further and further away from the military. Like there was less and less military people as I was getting further and further away, to find out that like my unit was so fucking out there that we were literally behind enemy lines for the majority of both our time in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's what we were. We were a specialized infantry unit. We were meant to combat the enemy forces where they were, right? We didn't live on bases. We lived out of buildings we took over. We lived out in the woods. We would make these little makeshift OPs. Like, that's just where I spent the majority of my time.
Yeah, it's like my buddy Ernesto. He was at what was called FOB Liberty, and but actually it was just one of what's his name's palaces, Saddam Hussein's palaces.
Mike, when you were out there, after you got there, what the hell were the ROEs like?
Oh, so I mean, I'll be brutally honest. The first deployment, it was a bit like the Wild West in that, do what you had to do in the moment. The best judgment you can make. You were literally, if you felt threatened and you had to engage hostiles, if you could justify why you did what you did, that it is what it is. We were an invading force. And so early into the war, we were actually still fighting. People don't remember this, but 20 something years ago, there was still an Iraqi army. And so there were engagements where we took over an airfield and these different things where we were fighting against, uniformed military. Obviously that all kind of caved in really quickly. And then we were fighting a lot more of the insurgency, but it was very different. It was very different early on. Obviously there are some horror stories as far as people taking things too far and things like that. I can say I'm one of the lucky ones. I can look back at my time, 15 months in Iraq and like another 6 to 8 months in Afghanistan. And I have no regrets in the sense of, I never had to engage someone that didn't deserve it, that wasn't actively trying to kill me. But there are stories of guys who had to do things and be put in situations where they, regret their actions later. But yeah, it was a different time. It was a different time. And even, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, even in Nam, we had situations where the ROEs came up. But I'll never forget some horror stories during the Obama administration where snipers out in the field had to radio back to get permission to engage obviously terrorists. Okay, before they could fire, they had to have some freaking lawyer give them the okay. Now, to me, that is nothing but a recipe for disaster.
It's fighting by bureaucracy, and you can't. It doesn't work.
It's unfortunate. There, you know, you give a bunch of 19-year-olds who are all, who spent the last 6 months, in a school that went kill, 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 and you give them free reign to do what they want. I understand, trying to put the reins on a bit, and have ROE because originally it's just like you don't die, do what you got to do so you don't die, and a lot of people made bad choices apparently, but I know just in the difference of OIF 1, which was 2003, to my next deployment, which was OEF 6, which was 2005, there was a very large jump in the sense of like, we could only engage if we actively saw them have weapons. And it changes over time, right? Because so again, if I saw him with a weapon, I can assume he's hostile and I can engage.
Well, there was an ROE, by the way, in the Battle for Mosul, where they were told literally by the talk that there were weapons tight. Even if they saw the enemy, if they were told there were weapons tight, there were weapons tight. Even though he says, I'm looking at the guy, he just killed people. He's got a weapon. They're like, your weapon's tight.
Yeah.
And it's like, it drove him crazy.
Yeah. I mean, again, over time, it depends because as part of the initial invasion, you got to think that their ROE is that we are invading their country. We are the hostile force coming into their house. So they have every right to defend themselves. And so that's why it was different. And then a year or two later, it was only if they have a weapon. And then I know like from guys that I talked to after my deployments where they're like, they were allowed to have weapons, but only if they were pointing it at us aggressively can we engage. And then after that, it was they can have weapons, they can do whatever they want with them. It's only until they're actively shooting at us can we engage. And then even after that, it was like, even if they've shot at you, like you can do like a warning shot and give them an opportunity to stop. And it's like you start putting the muzzle on these war hounds, and it's it can feel very limiting over time. Yeah.
Man. So with the situation, by the way, we had some questions in the chat. Have any of you ever been with other country units in combat fighting on the same side, and how was it? I served alongside some French Foreign Legionnaires, and I thought they were the best drinking guys I ever hung out with. But when you're in a dry country, it can get tough. But what was it like for you? I'm assuming you guys dealt with the Australians for sure.
Oh yeah, no, I'm very fortunate to serve with a lot of different folks from different countries. I spent some time with Canadian forces. Obviously I was stationed in Italy, so I worked with the Italian forces. We worked with the Germans, a lot of the Europe, obviously the Slovenians and Slovakians. We did some with the Australians. Even got to learn Krav Maga from the Israelis. So we did a lot of, especially again, good fortune. I was stationed in Europe.
Fighting.
Yes, the fact that I was in Europe.
There's a lot of groin kicks and punches.
A lot of yeah, it's a lot. The fact that we are a very blessed position to be in the European forces, and so we cross trained a lot. I as an airborne trooper, I have my airborne wings, but I've also jumped with foreign countries, so I actually have a set of the French foreign jump wings. I have the Italian foreign jump wings, which is again an incredible opportunity that a lot of people don't get. But yeah, just serving with I served with Green Berets. I've served with I had some missions where we were with some suits, and we were with some 3-letter acronym people providing security. And so, again, we were kind of a specialized fighting force. And
I can't remember. Do they still call them CID? It's the Army's version of CIA. SIDS is what we called them. I don't know.
CIA was Christians in action.
Christians in action. We dealt with, we had intel guys, we had counter intel guys. There were guys spying on us for
psyops.
And I caught one guy. He had a lighter, and he gave himself up. He had the lighter with the logo on it, and I'm like, and I turned to my guy. It's like, stay the fuck away from him. Don't go anywhere near that guy.
The wildest story that I have like that I can talk about legally. There was one time we were out in the middle of nowhere, and that's just kind of basically the idea of what we would do is basically send out 2 trucks and we just go kick the hornet's nest. Like that was the idea. We drive around until someone shoots at us, we kill them. Hey, we did our job. And so we were out there in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, literally nothing anywhere near us. And it comes over the radio like, hey, stop the vehicles. So we stop, and then like I'm like, all right, because I'm like the second truck. I'm like, hey, what'd you need? He goes, I didn't call us to stop. I thought you did. And we're like, well, I didn't call us to stop. Like, who called? And then he just comes over the radio like, I'm coming out of the tree line. My hands are up. I have weapons. I'm a friendly. And out of the tree line comes this dude just walking, and we're like, who the fuck is this guy?
Oh my God, this echoes the story I just told.
Oh my man. God. And he was just like, wasn't he? I mean, I don't know who he's with. He didn't say, he's like, hey, where you guys headed? We're like, Fob, so-and-so. He's, can I get a ride? We're like, I guess. I mean, you called us, like, sure. And he hopped in the back, and like we raided it in. They're like, just bring him. And we're like, okay. And he just sat in the back quietly, didn't say nothing to nobody. Got back to the base. A chopper came in, picked him up, and he was gone. And we're just like, what the what
was that masked man?
Yeah, like,
dude, I've got to tell you what happened to us. We're in Honduras. Same thing. We're just stopping for the day to get some chow and to get some rest. Okay. And all of a sudden we look out, and there's this guy, tall guy, walking out of the jungle with a little tiny Indian, like Peruvian looking Indian. And we're like, what the fuck is this? And we're all like on edge. Weapons up, we're like, what is going on here? Who is this guy? And he's like, friendly. And we're like, and he's clearly American. He has an American accent. And he walks in and he says, hey man, is it okay if we have some chow with you? And I'm like, I guess, let me ask my sergeant. Sergeant's fine with it. So he eats with us and played some poker with us. And then him and his little Peruvian friend got up after chow and poker, taking some of our money. He wandered right back into the fucking jungle. And I'm like, what the fuck was that? And my sergeant goes, he's a spook. He's either CIA or something like that, and it's like, you'll run into them every once in a while. They just wander in.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
They speak the language. They know what to say and what not to say. And
was this guy Anglo or was he Middle Eastern?
He would. It was kind of hard to tell because he had like the hood and everything, and he was all greased up,
wearing a shmi and all that shit.
Yeah, so he was definitely, my best guess he's part of some, special forces recon kind of like tracking targets. I don't know what the fuck. I mean, I couldn't pick him out of a lineup even in the moment. But yeah, it was weird, man. It was like tree people, like just coming out of the wood line, and I was like, all right, man. Okay. but yeah, we did work with CIA and on a couple things, and we provide security when they were searching for certain things, and yeah, we did a lot, man. I was part of security teams when we were doing the first free elections in Iraq. So we were providing security at some of the polling places, and
everybody I got to do a lot around with their purple finger.
Yeah. It was crazy. It was crazy. And obviously every time, it's always like we're on high alert because, there's rumors they're going to blow up this or blow up that. And so it was always stressful, but man, I look back at it now and I'm like, man, I did some shit. Like I did some shit in my time,
Well, I paused on this image because after this image, we're going to get into the other stuff. And I'm going to save that for the second half of the show. But there's this one image right here that I'm curious about. What was this image for? Who made it? And what does it signify? And
so that was one of our guys in our unit was a bit of an artist, and so he did that, and he was on more of the religious faith, And so obviously this has to do with Sicily drop zone. It's kind of where we would practice airborne operations in Italy. Yeah, we had what we called the patron saint of the airborne. And so this idea of, a chaplain blessing the guys as they're this was really in the lead up to the invasion into Iraq, because it was the first airborne operation since Vietnam. And we sent in, I think it was 60,000 troops into northern Iraq, then jumped in 2003. And so this was in the lead up to that, it was the guy blessing the guys as they prepare to make the jump.
So as they made the push into Iraq, you were still in Italy at that point?
So yeah, so I literally was graduating airborne school when the invasion happened. And so, 3 weeks later, I'm in Italy, and then 2.5 weeks later after that, I was in Iraq. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to save the rest of this for the second half. We're going to go ahead and go to commercial break. We will be right back, guys, with more from Michael after this message. Hi, guys. This is Gary from Pop Culture Minefield here on KGRA, and we're leaving for our first break. I hope we survive.
Did you know 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated? If you struggle with focus, run low on energy, or when it's time to finally sleep, you simply can't, this can all be linked to dehydration, and Fuel Up has the answer. Our proprietary formula contains the finest cellular hydration with the strongest immune-enhancing natural ingredients. The Fuel Up system is made up of 3 different incredibly tasting varieties. Wake kickstarts your day with a jolt of caffeine. Play boosts focus while hydrating your cells. Rest not only helps you relax, but also rejuvenates your cells while you sleep. Here's what our clients have to say.
I really don't miss my coffee, and you can tell the difference.
So I'm going to take it for the energy. I'm going to take it for the play. I'm going to take it, all day.
And it works. That's the thing. It works. We love it.
Take the Fuel Up Challenge now, where we offer a Feel the Difference money-back guarantee. Fuel Up for life.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Oh wow, we survived! Welcome back to the commercial break. Now for some more Pop Culture Minefield on KGRA.
We have returned to the show.
Auf Wiedersehen.
And this, of course, is with my good buddy Michael. I'm so glad you're here again. I wanted to get more into this because I'm fascinated by your experiences, and everybody knows that because I led a boring life, that I have to know other people's lives so I can have something interesting going on. But you then shipped down from Italy down to Iraq, straight to Iraq.
Right.
And what airfield did you land at? Do you know?
That would have been, my God, whatever the Kirkuk airfield was. I don't remember the exact name anymore. Because I know in Afghanistan it was Bagram. But I forget what the freaking airfield name was in Kirkuk. But yeah, northern Iraq.
Northern Iraq. You're up there close to the what would become Kurdistan for a while.
Sure.
Yep. And the Kurdish were very friendly from my experience because they worked with us and very friendly. What did you think of them?
Fine. I was at that time I was a young man and I was panicked for that I was going to die every minute of the day and that there was a bullet on my name on it on every corner. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of it was just anxious paranoia all the time. For
how old were you at this point?
19.
No, 19. The average age of the American soldier in the Vietnam War was 19. You don't know that song, do you?
No.
It was a big popular song back in the 80s. And the song was called 19. So there you are, 19 years old, healthy young lad, not old enough to drink, but you're ready to kill for your country. How did that feel?
It was weird. It was weird. realizing very quickly that, everyone was basically around my age. My sergeant at the time would have been like 21. His boss, the sergeant first class, is maybe 24, 25. So you realize really quickly, like, there's these guys put into such a position of power and authority, and it's slightly older than me. I saw, the best way I can put it is, I saw very early kind of the I don't want to say the idiocy of it, but like just kind of on its face of how strange it could be when a guy that I had went to basic with, had his college degree, and so came out as an E4, came out of basic. So we had the same training, and honestly, I was better at PT than him. I was a better shot than him. I passed our classes better than him. Yet I was an E1 and he was an E4 because he had a college degree. And so in the hierarchy of the military, he was 3 ranks above me. And yet, so it was just weird. It was just a weird thing to learn. And again, not coming from a family that have served and all that, like, this was all foreign to me. So it was a lot to learn very quickly in a combat zone.
In a combat zone. So let's get into this. Your first exposure to combat. What happened? How did that day start? And what happened?
So, I mean, combat in the sense of, like, we're shooting and they're shooting at us, because, getting into Iraq, it's a combat zone. So, you're on edge, and it's silly. It's silly to say now, right? Because we flew into an airfield that was protected and secured. Still, you do like the combat landing where, like, the plane goes and just drops in and then and stops, because they don't want to do the slow ascent where they're an easy target. So, but in my mind, and again, nobody told me this, but in my mind, it was much like D-Day, where the back of that plane's going to open and just gunfire is going to come pouring in, right? And like that was going to be my entry into combat, and it really wasn't. Plane lands, door opens, guy with a clipboard comes in, is like, all right, come on out. And he's pointing, you go here, you fill out this. And it was just like the bureaucracy of it.
I tell people all the time, man, first time you get there, a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, a lot of paperwork.
And they don't want to show that in movies. Boys and Companies, not Boys and Companies. What was the other one? Hamburger Hill shows it. It shows them having to do paperwork first day in country.
Yeah, so it's different. And then, which isn't the experience for everybody, right? Because the guys that jumped in were definitely not doing paperwork when they hit the drop zone.
Yeah, they were going straight into combat.
But, so those first couple of days was like I said, was be on the trucks, getting to where we were going and getting to with my people. And, after what seemed like forever, probably like 2-3 days, I finally got to my company, my platoon, my squad. And I remember I got there and they're like, oh, you're going to be in second squad. Like, okay, cool. Where's second squad? And they were out on a mission. So I was just kind of sitting around for a couple of hours, just waiting for them to come. And I'll never forget, I was sitting there and they had, since I was there, they're like, hey, why don't you do gate guard? Just to, do something. So I'm sitting on this gate and I'm just waiting, and hours go by. And finally, I remember the trucks come in and they're like, hey, that's second squad. They're coming. And they came in. I remember I was so jazzed, right? Like, this is it. This is my moment. I've trained months for this. I'm now in the Army. I now have a home. I now have a team. This is what I've been waiting for. And I was just like, hey, guys. And they looked like, those scenes you watch of, like, Band of Brothers or Saving Private Ryan, where these guys are just like, man, they're dragging ass, and you can tell they've been through some shit. And they have that stare that goes right through you.
And the last thing they want to do is talk to new guy.
Yeah. And so, here, I don't know, in my mind, again, my 19-year mind, like, they were going to be like, hey, CQ, like, just welcome me with open arms and everything. And they just basically shoved me out the way and kept going. And I felt so dejected, because I was like, this was it. This was my moment. But I understand it now, right? Like, these guys had been fighting for weeks. These guys were tired. They were hungry. They just came off a full day a shift basically out in the in the enemy territory. The last thing they wanted to do, like you said, was just talk to some new guy who was all hyper and excited.
And they often just call you new guy. They don't even call you by name.
Yeah, basically.
Shut up, new guy.
Still use FNG?
Yeah. Not as much, but yeah, that comes around. Fucking
Or
new
Cherry?
guy. Yeah, Cherry. Oh, that's the big one. Cherry's the big one. Which we had a guy named Sherry, last name Sherry, which that was a whole thing. But yeah. But it took me a while to realize that what I hadn't grasped the concept of was the reason I was the new guy was because someone's not there anymore, right? There's a hole to fill in that squad. And it never dawned on me that early that, again, this band of brothers, these guys that had jumped into a combat zone, that had fought, and that there was somebody, whether he was killed or injured or whatever, there was somebody not there anymore. And they're plugging me in, this kid that doesn't know his ass from his elbow. I literally, these guys had trained for months as a unit prior to this deployment. I had finished basic training. I knew how to point and shoot a gun, but outside of that, I really didn't know much. I knew nothing about radios. I knew nothing about battle drills. I knew nothing about anything. And so it hadn't really dawned on me. And so that first night, or it would have been the next day, because that was like late in the middle of the night when they showed back up. But the next day, they rested. Finally, it's time to go on a mission. They're like, all right, get this. And basically, like, we're going to make you the bitch. Like, you're going to grab all the gear. Like, it was my job to load up the truck. Again, bottom, and no complaints. Bottom guy on the totem pole. I get it. You get the shit detail. Totally get it. I want to show my worth. I want to show my value to this team. And so, like, I'm grabbing everybody's gear and I'm loading the trucks and I'm filling up the truck and fueling it and putting in the rations and doing all this stuff. And the sergeant of my squad, he's like, hey, we don't trust you, basically in a nutshell. We don't trust you. We don't know you. So the last thing we're going to do is go on a mission and have you watching our back. So basically, you're going to drive the truck. You're going to stay with the truck. And that's it. That's all we're going to trust you with, which I was like, hey, whatever. Yes, I'll do that. Little did they know, I had only gotten my driver's license a week before basic.
Oh my God.
Because I needed a license ID to get into the military. So I had never really driven before, but all right, hey, I'm going to do what I got to do to help the team. And so I remember that first night, this is my about to go on my first mission ever in the military. I get the truck all ready and I climb in, and I remember I asked one of the guys, and I'm like, where are the keys? And everyone just looked at me and stared at me because they're like, it's a fucking, you turn the knot, it turns on. And I was like, oh yeah. And they're like, do you know what you're doing? I'm like, yes, absolutely. I just forgot. And so I turn on the truck, and now again, it's the middle of the night. There are no traffic lights in Iraq, right? It's dark. And so I couldn't see anything. So I'm like literally looking at the dash, and I just saw a little thing that said lights. And I'm like, oh, cool. And I flip on the lights, and somebody smacks, they took a helmet and whacked me in the head with it. Luckily, I was wearing a helmet at the time, still rung my bell. And they're like, turn off the fucking lights. And I went, oh my God. And they're like, you just let everyone know in the fucking country that we're leaving the base. And I'm like, but I can't see. How am I supposed to drive? They're like, with your fucking night vision, genius.
Yeah, put your nogs on, brain.
And I went, I don't have night vision. No one has given me night vision. And they're like, Jesus fucking Christ. So they gave me a pair of goggles. And again, I had never used night vision before, because in basic, we didn't cover that. It was basic. We didn't do night vision. And so luckily I found some other private, and I was like, hey man, can you fucking, like, he had to show me how to mount it, how to turn it on, all that. And the thing they don't show in movies with night vision, especially again, because I know it's a lot better now, but at that time, 2003 night vision, it's just green. It's just everything's one layer of green. And I try to explain to people what night vision does is it amplifies ambient light. So the idea is if there's moon and stars out, it'll take that little bit of light and amplify it to give you a general outline of what's there. Well, of course, that night, complete cloud cover. So I just see green and I assume I'm like, my night vision's broken because I just see fuzzy green and nothing else. And luckily I wasn't the lead truck. And so basically all I did, we had these things called blackout lights where with your visible eyes, you don't see anything. But when you have the night vision on, you see these bright lights.
It's infrared.
And so I just, the infrared. And so basically I figured out how to put it in drive. And I just, to this day, I can close my eyes and I can still see the burnt, into my retina, these lights. And I just kept the vehicle following those lights. And what's terrifying is every time it goes over a hill, you just see the lights disappear. And I just hold my breath and I hope they didn't drive off a cliff. and because I'm like, I'm going over too. And then I would see the lights appear again. I'm like, okay.
Thank God.
And it was just like that for hours. And we did it, they did raids and they did a bunch of stuff. And I would just always be shaking in the truck.
Was this QRF or what were you doing?
It was different. There were times where we were QRF. There were times where we're doing raids. There's times where we're looking for specific people. There were times when we'd be doing security for other organizations doing their work. It just depended. That night, I think we were just doing patrols.
Well, I know that because you say raids and QRF, but the fact is, just so people understand, QRF it means quick reaction force. Mm-hmm. And what it is you get quick intel, actionable intel. At this house, there's this group of people, bomb makers, weapon cache, and they would go in and they would, and like with the Stryker Brigade, the 72nd Stryker Brigade with the 2nd Infantry Division, they would go in and just show up at the front doorstep quietly because those vehicles are so quiet. And then they would breach a building and clear it and whatever, bad guys they had to take out.
When in doubt, drop a frag.
Yeah. Or as I taught my girlfriend because my sergeant says, hey man, if shit ain't working for you, go grenade bowling. It
like
works.
That. Yeah. So, and we use QRF for that, but we also use QRF for in the sense of if another unit was out there and let's say they got under an ambush, obviously we'd go into support. Or in certain situations, of course they love to build our little OPs, our little fobs.
QRF is often a rescue force.
Right. And then sometimes, they would I don't know who decided where to put bases, but they would put bases basically in a bowl. So you have mountain ranges on both sides where the people could just shoot down at us. It was awesome.
Well, that's what they talked about in our, because we've had him on, the director of the film, The Outpost. It's like, this was just one of the dumbest designs. They ended up calling it Keating, but I forget what it was called before that. It just
Restrepo.
It's a barrel. It's a fucking barrel.
Yeah. And so then QRF in those situations would be they'd fire off a rocket. They'd miss because these things were about as accurate as, I don't know, camel spitting. But basically they'd fire a rocket. It'd miss by a couple miles. You would be like, all right, it came from there. QRF would go drive out there. Obviously those guys would be long gone, but you'd find, remnants of a camp or whatever it is. And it was a lot of that, especially in Afghanistan.
And, I learned quickly with Iraq that they would refer to it as hitting a dry hole. They would go there and it's like the enemy was there, but they haven't been there for a while. And it was one dry hole after another, but eventually you're going to strike water. And when was your first time? What happened?
Oh man. Jesus. It's hard to remember the first because it was a series. So about I would say about a week in, we got into different firefights and it was just one after the other, after the other, after the other. I believe the first time we were in to crit, we had taken over this little it was a police station at one point. And basically in the middle of the night they would attack. They would attack and try to drive us out of there. And obviously, we much better fighting force, and we were fortified and things like that. So it was a lot of battles like that at first. And then eventually, I mean, there were firefights. This is what. So a good buddy of mine is Mark Baker, the creative genius behind Private Murphy, the awesome cartoon strip. And he did this whole series where he animated people's stories, and because I used to tell him all these stories and these crazy stories, and again, it's how it is. You serve, you get these crazy stories, and they don't think nothing of it. And so he's immortalized some of them. I got to send them to you in little comic strips, which are weird to see it in comic form. But for instance, this one time we were at that base, and of course I was taking a dump, as one does, because you got to do those things. And I had uniform kind of half off, and my weapon with me, and you just hear boom, incoming RPG, and I just reacted, and shooting and running and all, we're throwing weapons and ammo and all that. And then at one point, someone looks over to me like, CQ, what the fuck? And I'm like, what? He's like, where's your pants, man? And I look down, and I am just free balling it on the rooftop of this building. And I just was like, oh shit. Like, I was like, it just, because it was so adrenaline pumping that you just go. So we had situations like that. I mean, there were situations we'd be doing patrols, a car comes flying at you, and I mean, you have to react in the way that you have to react and put down the threat. I mean, we'd be out in the wood line, I mean, it runs the gamut. There's really such a spectrum of kind of combat, especially there's the inner city kind of combat versus the rural and out in the woods kind of combat. And if we had suspected hotspots or kind of areas where people would be kind of using to transport bad stuff, we'd set up OPs, we set up ambushes and things like that. And so yeah, it was a lot, and it was a lot. And I don't even, it's funny looking back at it now where I realize like that was a lot. We went through it, man. We went through it. And
let me ask you a weird question, and this is out of the blue. Does the military still issue M8 Willie Pete grenades?
Oh, yeah, they do. And let me preface this by saying I've been out for 17 years at this point. Right. But while I was in 2003 in Iraq, in 2005 in Afghanistan, we did have white phosphorus grenades, mostly for the 203 grenade launcher. So like the little underbarrel, you shoot it off. So you'd have like 20 grenades. You'd have the grenadier, and you'd have like 20 grenades, and it would be like 15, HP or HE. High explosive, HE, and then you'd have 3 flares and like 2 white phosphorus, something like that.
No fragmentary.
Yeah, that's the HE.
I mean, that's the HE. Yeah, it's a high explosive. That's typically the fragmentation. But yeah, we'd have that, and then you'd have a couple of like the higher ups would carry the what they call them. Oh, the grenades that just burn hotter than hell. Yeah, oh my God, I'm gonna draw a blank. The incendiaries that basically, like, God forbid we had to ditch a vehicle or something, you'd pop one of these grenades and throw it inside just for it to completely melt the insides and destroy everything.
Yeah, when we got overrun,
yeah,
we had to destroy we had some TS&C equipment in there, and we had to destroy that, and we used those to do that. But I liked Willie Pete because that would take the worry out of being too close. Okay. And Charlie didn't like Willie Pete, so fuck Charlie. All right.
Yeah.
That was then.
Fuck that guy.
Thermite grenades. That's the one. Whoever put that in the chat. Thermite. I couldn't think of the word thermite.
Martin said thermite.
Yeah.
But Willie Peter, just so you guys know, white phosphorus, it burns white hot.
Yeah.
It's very hot. It's phosphorus. It'll burn underwater.
Mhm.
And
You
once
can't
it
put
hits
it
your
out.
body,
Yeah.
it gets in your body and it just keeps doing damage until it's done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty nasty stuff. It's pretty nasty stuff. We typically didn't want to use it in a lot of situations just because, so like for instance in Iraq, it's a lot of close quarters combat, so
you don't want to get hit by your own shit.
You launch one of those, you're choking out everybody in the area. Again, in certain situations, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. And then in areas like Afghanistan, which were very wide open areas, you could launch one of those and you see the little white cloud and then the wind could shift and send all of that right back at you. And it's just not fun. So we typically, that's why we didn't really carry many of them.
Sulfur smell.
Yeah, it's not fun. It's not fun. And if it gets on your clothes or anything like that, and like you said, you can't wash it out or anything. So it's really in very specific circumstances that we'd use that. We use flares more than that, and obviously smoke grenades and things like that a lot more for sure.
So your first combat really is just a series of skirmishes.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's nothing that stands out.
Just as they were there.
Yeah, it's nothing that stands out of like, wow, this was that one. Like I have.
What was that one for you? The first one.
There were battles that stand out in your memory of like, God damn, I can't believe we survived that or whatnot. There's a couple. Obviously, the day I got shot. I mean, obviously, that's always going to be one that stands out.
But that was your third or second tour.
That was my second tour. It was Afghanistan. It was 6 months into Afghanistan.
You were seasoned at that point.
Oh, absolutely. I got all the stripes and the slants and all the different things and the accoutrement to the uniform that you would get, which we never really cared about. But
I was explaining to my girlfriend what slashes on the sleeve mean, what it means when you have patches on both shoulders. Yep. Each one, it's very specific, especially
very
in the Army.
Specific. It's a pain in the ass.
And each one of those little slashes is a tour of duty.
Yep.
And like I had my first sergeant, Vietnam. He'd served all the way back in Vietnam. His sleeve was all these hash marks, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, that guy's been deployed a lot.
Yeah, so you get the hash marks, which represent your time in service.
Not Korea, huh?
And then you get the slash. The slash marks are to denote time in combat. So a lot of our guys got pretty decked up pretty quickly, and in fact had matching sleeves where usually you'd have a lot more of one than the other. But at that time we were deploying every single year, so you had guys that were stacking those things up pretty quickly.
You got one for each deployment. That's right.
So and you would get for every 6 months in combat, you would get a slash for every 6 months in combat, and then I think it's every 2 years of service you get a dash. And then obviously you get the combat patch. I mean, it was so much, man. It was like we hated it, honestly. Everybody's like, "Oh, it looks so." We hated it because you have to get everything had to be perfect and measured down to the thing, and you pressed and it's all for parade nonsense. Where you're like, I get paid to shoot people. Like I don't get paid to dress pretty, and worry about that stuff. So yeah.
Well, you bring that up, and it reminds me of my brother Michael when he died, and everybody turned to me to do his uniform, dress him in his uniform, and I'm like, I'm glad I remember this shit where the ribbons go.
It's a lot. It's a lot, man. I had my uniform hung up and everything in the closet, and I think we were moving or something. I forget why, but I had to take off, or we were fumigating or something. I had to take off the stuff, and then I was just like, I'm just not going to put it back. I'm just, it's so much. And I was just like, I don't want to do it wrong. But at the same time, I don't want to take the time to do it right. So I think I still have like a pile of the ribbons and stuff in a corner somewhere. Cause I'm like, I'm just not going to do it. But yeah, no, you had asked about combat experiences that stand out in my mind.
Yeah, the first one where it really like, this is it.
We were in I'm trying to think.
This is where it gets personal.
Yeah. There's a couple. I mean, and there's a couple that like, we lost guys and guys got really, really hurt. And I don't know. I don't use that stuff because I always feel like that's their story. versus my story, even though I was there. But I can remember there was this one mission where there was like a route between these mountains, and I think this was Afghanistan. It's all this shit bleeds together after time. But we were in Afghanistan, and we had this suspected route that people were using to come in and out of Pakistan because we were right on the border, and they were recruiting ISIS and all that. Well, at the time it was Al Qaeda, not ISIS, Al Qaeda, and so we set up an ambush, and basically we got into these two mountain peaks, and we were going to have visibility over this route through the mountains and whatever. And like, here's the thing, as great as we are at our job, the people that know that land know it better than anyone, right? And so the brass and their infinite wisdom is like, okay, well, we can't drive trucks there, they'll know we're going to pull up, and we can't fly helicopters there because everybody will hear it. So the bright idea is we're going to fly helicopters up to like a mile or two away, or 5 miles, 10 miles, whatever it was. And we're going to have the infantry guys walk up this mountain and set up this ambush. Now, genius in on paper, but when you realize you've just left 30 infantrymen with enough equipment and gear and supplies to last a week, trudging up a mountain in the middle of the night in the dark, we might as well have been lumberjacks taking down the forest. Like, we made so much noise, like just and we're just all bitching and complaining.
Yeah, I know. There's the first thing that pops in my mind. Nobody complains like soldiers and truckers.
God, it's like fucking just we're airborne. Just dump us out of the plane. We'll just land on it, and it'll be so much easier than having to walk up this fucking. We literally got dropped there it was like 4 a.m, and it was like noon by the time we got to the top. Like, we'd been walking forever, and like I said, by that time, everyone in the fucking district knew we were there. But we were there for a couple days, and then and we're like, nobody's gonna mess with us. They know we're here. They're not gonna do the route. And then basically anybody that served at that time would know that once in a while you'd pick up radio traffic. And the worst kind of radio traffic you could pick up is this prayer that was very distinct. And it was basically the prayer that they would say before they would go on, like, basically suicide missions. And it was them praying to their gods and this and that, and for justice and give us the strength and all that. But typically, right when that prayer is done, that's when all shit would break loose. And so we were up in the mountains, and the prayer comes over the radio, and we're like, oh, fuck, great. And so we all hunkered down, and as soon as it was over, rockets start coming in, gunshots start happening, and we're getting, we're two teams split over two mountains, and we're basically all getting shot from different directions. So kind of just all hell breaks loose, and you got guys calling out, and again, we're very good at what we do, but we're also human and we're fallible, and sometimes you see gunfire, and you might forget, like, oh shit, we have a team on that side of the mountain, and you react. Luckily, nothing like that didn't happen. I'm just saying it could happen, and you hear stories about that kind of stuff happening, so we're very cognizant of it. But I remember at the time I was a saw gunner. Saw gunner is the big machine gun, right? Everybody else carries M4s, M249s, the saw, squad automatic weapon, big old machine gun. So we were taking contact, let's just say, from the north, and we're all looking north. And my squad leader is basically going, CQ, cover the rear. And it's the worst thing to hear. It's the worst thing to hear because, like, if I'm going to die in a firefight, I want to be facing the enemy. Like, in my head, I'm going to be facing this way, and I'm going to get a shot in the back of the head. You know what I mean? So, but I have a role to play. You get your orders, you do your orders. So I post up facing south and watching our rear, and I'm hearing them just calling out, and over there, 2 o'clock, explosions going off. And I'm just sitting there behind my scope and just like, fucking somebody, just somebody. Like, I'm so irritated at this point. Like, I want somebody to shoot. Like, I'm just irritated. And so little did I know that, again, we were 2 teams that were split over 2 hills. The other team on the other hill had sent kind of a scouting party, and they were kind of scouting the base. Now, when they had heard the shooting and everything break out, they started charging up the mountain to try to get back with their team. What they didn't account for is they charged up the wrong mountain. And so they were coming up from behind us. Now, if I had opened up, because I start seeing trees move and, the birds fly, like telltale signs that someone's coming up, charging up the hill. Had I opened up, A, I would have killed them all. And B, while it would have been terrible, I would have been justified in the sense that nobody should have been coming up from behind us. Nobody. There was nobody supposed to be there. Call it what you will, fate, kismet, touch of God, angels, whatever. Some reason I had my finger on the trigger. I'm at a half pull and I just stop. And, again, at this time, I'm a seasoned combat veteran. I have shot. It wasn't a hesitation to shoot. I've shot plenty at that point. But I don't know. And I waited longer than I should have. And then I heard the voices. They were close enough that I heard the voices and I could clearly make out English. And, we have a call and response thing for security, like lightning, thunder kind of thing. And so I made the call out and then they responded like, CQ? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, and then they're like, hey.
That's not the response.
Yeah. I was like, wait, that's not the response. But, obviously I realized and they come charging up the tree line. I'm like, what? I almost fucking killed you all, and obviously they ran past me and they went to provide support and everything. And, it's moments like that. It's funny. I've been in combat so many times. I've been in conflict so many times, firefights so many times, but it's moments like that tend to stick out in my mind as far as it's the almosts versus the actually happens that you end up, that just kind of burn into your mind, really.
And, and I brought something up earlier. I said there are 2 kinds of fighting. There's where you're fighting the unseen enemy. Mm-hmm. It's just like night battle. You see the tracers coming in and you're just returning fire in a direction where the fire is coming from. Yeah. Then there's those combat where you see the enemy and you see your target and you have to squeeze on that. And people, don't know what that's like. And I think that's a fascination for some people. Sure. I know that it's fascinating to meet people who are willing to go over that line. Because once you are willing to go over that line and do it, it's like the joke. I said, yeah, once you kill somebody, it gets easier later to kill more. But the fact is, it's true. Once you make that moral decision, the moral decision to cross that line, you become what they call you in the military is a trained killer. And then, and then the shift happens, where you've got to stop doing that. Stop thinking that way. But it's really next to impossible for you to get rid of that. And it's weird for people to understand that when people try to come back to society and reintegrate. And of course, because you and I have talked about this before, that the last people who should be helping veterans reintegrate into society is the military, because they're really good at training you to kill, not good at training you learning how not to be that way anymore.
Yeah.
And sure. But you did 2 tours?
Did 2 tours. I did 15 months in Iraq and about like 6 or 7 months in Afghanistan.
What inspired you to do the second tour? Was it your bond with the other guys?
This is my orders, man. No, yeah, because I went to Italy and I got sent forward. Which another thing we didn't really talk about was that, and again, it goes into the reason why they were not happy to see me. The guys that jumped into Iraq were told this was a 3-week invasion. They were going to drop in, secure the airfield, let the Air Force come in, secure the base. Then they were going to get pulled out, and like 10th Mountain or somebody else was going to come in and do the
that are trained to be occupying forces.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is the opposite. And we were there for 15 months. which is so a lot of guys were very angry to see me because when you're getting reinforcements, you ain't going home anytime soon.
You ain't going home. Yeah.
So so that was difficult. And we went back to 15 months later, we go back to Italy. And I'll never forget it. Again, it's one of those things, this weird things that stick in your mind is we land in Aviano, which is it's a bus ride from Aviano to Vicenza, which is where our base was. We land in Aviano, we're getting on the buses, big celebrations and peoples and, great. And now we're going to go back to our base and their families are waiting for us there. And we get on the bus and everybody's excited and, whatever. And they said, hey, great job, you guys, we did it, blah, blah. You're going to go back to the base. You're going to get 30 days off. You're going to get a whole month off. Be with your families, enjoy them, yada, yada, yada. But we need you to understand something. We are deploying next year. And it will be another year-long deployment. So it's like really going from a high to a low very quickly. Very, like you just survived 15 months in the worst possible place in the world. Where literally people are trying to kill you, and then you're home, you're safe, and then you find out like enjoy it because in a couple months you're going back. And so, and then it's not even what it is too. It was this idea of what's the old saying, like the evil versus the evil you don't kind of thing. So it's like it's one thing if they were like you're going to go back to Iraq, where we're like all right, we got a sense of it, but now it's like you're going to go back, but you're going to Afghanistan this time. So it's a whole different war. I don't care. They can call it GWAT and they can call it. It was a whole different war. It was a whole different experience, top to bottom, start to finish. It was completely different. And nothing we did to train, nothing we did in Iraq really trained us to what we were going to have to do in Afghanistan and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, because one's more urban combat. The other one is all out.
Iraq honestly wasn't that jarring for me because it kind of reminded me of New York City. Like New York City, if it was built during the biblical times. Like that's what Iraq reminded me of. Where it was very city and industrial, but it was like mud stone buildings and like wires everywhere and sewage that ran through the street. But there was water and there were toilets and there were bazaars and like and stores and things and streets and castles.
Yeah, they had hookah bars.
Yeah, and they had these things. So there was infrastructure there, and you could tell it maybe at one point it was very nice. Afghanistan was straight up like walking in the biblical times. It's just desert and mountains and tent cities, which was incredible to see. Like this whole like a city that you would drive past, and you're like, oh wow, and you would turn around a day later, come back, and it's gone. Like like it didn't exist. And then, you keep driving and then you find this caravan of people, just like these nomads just kind of wandering. And it was wild, man. It was wild to see, there's no paved roads. There was nothing. Like if you didn't build it, it didn't exist. So it was a whole different thing. So again, that coming back from Iraq and they're like on the bus, they're like, hey, you're going to get 30 days off. Woo, yeah. And, enjoy it because we're going to come back and we're going to start training because we got a deployment next year to Afghanistan. And it's just like, fuck. So again, it wasn't really a choice of mine to go to. Now, again, I probably would have at that time. I probably would have chosen to go with my guys because I drank the Kool-Aid. I was as in it as you can be, both feet. And but it was my orders. I was during that time there was a thing called stop loss.
Infantry. That's infantry.
Yeah, you have to buy into it.
It's 100%. Like I joke, you're more likely to find an athist before you find a leftist in the infantry.
Yeah, that's very true. So there was stop loss. So there was a big controversy in there that you had guys that we get back from Iraq and they're like, I only got like 8-9 months left in my contract. So they're like, awesome, I'm gonna be out before the next deployment and I'm done with this bullshit. And then, 2 months prior to, they go, hey, the Army has instituted stop loss because too many people. Remember, no offense to those that joined before 9/11, but they didn't sign up for war, right? They signed up for everything before.
College education.
I mean, and that's okay. That's totally fine. But they wanted to get the fuck out. They were like, I didn't sign up for this bullshit. And so everybody was trying to leave basically after that first round of deployments. And what happened is the Army saw the numbers just dying, and so they instituted
recruitment started dropping.
Oh, absolutely. Once you see bodies on the news,
And
like it's one thing to be like, yeah.
Well, you also have the backdoor draft where they started really using National Guard and reserves more than they used to.
Yeah.
And you started seeing National Guard and reservists with multiple deployments, which is just unheard of.
Yeah.
And it was bad. I blame Donald Rumsfeld, Bush, and Dick Cheney for some of the stupidity with that.
So I remember, like, I was still under contract, but a lot of guys who were very angry because they got stop lost, and basically, it was, I think the cutoff was like, I want to say it was like a month or 2 months prior to the deployment, you could not leave. And because that Army contract says we got you for 8 years, there wasn't shit you could do about it.
Yeah.
And so these guys deployed for an entire year before they were allowed to come back and leave the service. Now, they got bonuses and they got, time and a half, basically. Like, they got all this extra money. But when you're like, I don't want to fucking die, the money doesn't matter. When you're like, I want to get the hell out of here, the money doesn't matter. So, yeah, I mean, it was a tough time. It was a difficult time for a lot of people.
Yeah, and so let's go ahead and I'll get the video back up here again, and we'll just go through, because we got just enough time to go through this, and I wish we had more time. But
there's always another time. There's always another time.
Well, yeah, it's like it's not like our friendship's going to end right after this episode.
Never.
So here we go. Let's get this baby going, because the incident that day, man. How did that day start, by the way, for you?
Oh, the day. To understand that day, you need to understand that at the beginning of our deployment, we were seasoned now. We knew how to do a year deployment. And my buddy Paredes, God bless that kid. That's 10 years apart, those pictures, 10 years apart. Oh my God, don't show these pictures. I look like such a dweeb.
Yeah, you said, so I'm grabbing them all.
I know, this is a bad picture. I don't even know why that's up there. But anyway, so at the beginning of deployment,
I love this one, by the way, because this fits into the joke. I said in front of a bunch of senior NCOs, they're all standing there looking at all of us. We're all standing out there in our poncho liners, getting wet. It was raining, and it just packed together. And they didn't see me walk up the hill around to the tower that they're standing in overlooking. So I just walked in behind him, and the guy goes, I don't know what the fuck to make of this. And I said, kind of looks like a tossed salad.
Yeah, this is 90% of what we did. We just sit around, lay around, tell jokes.
Those are the old BDUs. That's before the ACUs, man.
Yes, that's before. Yeah, that was in Germany when we were training up for the Afghanistan deployment, and then obviously, which here's the biggest joke of all. And I can always look at pictures and know exactly the time frame because look, there's one of our bases in Afghanistan. So we wore the BDUs. Barriers? No, those were HESCOs. We filled them with sand. So they're just big sand blocks. But so the joke was we wore BDUs, green fatigues in Iraq in the desert. So we stuck out like sore thumbs.
Right.
And we're in green trucks. And then we finally got smart. So we got our deserts and went to Afghanistan and we're stationed in the mountains in the woods.
Where there's trees.
So we were in tan, in a green and brown environment. So like, it's like, dude, it was such a joke. And like, we could not get our fucking shit straight.
A lot of people don't know that camo isn't designed to disguise the body. The camo is designed to break up the human form.
Yes.
So it blends with the environment and you can't make out the shape of a human.
When you're a different color than the environment,
when you're a different color, you stand
makes you a big old target. So yeah, so there was a lot of that. So again, to understand that part was that when we initially got there, we realized that you can't do a year deployment nonstop. You have to give everyone at least a 2-week R&R. So, but you couldn't have everyone go on R&R at the same time. Otherwise it'd be chaos. There'd be nobody left. So they created this lottery system where they're like, okay, pulling names out of a hat, you're going to get your 2 weeks and they're going to be spread out for everybody. So only one guy was out of 2 weeks at a time. Sucks for the guys that drew early, sucks for the guys that drew at the end, where it's like, imagine you get your 2-week R&R like a month before you're going to return anyway. It was a whole thing. So the dream would be right in the middle. You do 6 months of combat, you do a 2-week R&R, you do another 6 months of combat, call it a day. I drew like, I think it was like a month in. I drew my 2-week R&R. It was going to be like a month into the deployment, which sucks. You do a month, get 2-week break, and then do 11 months of combat. It sucks. So what happened was there was a guy that drew like almost right in the middle. It was like 6.5, 7 months-ish. But his wife was like 2 months pregnant at the time. And so he wanted to, or no. His wife was about to give birth. I'm sorry. His like a month from giving birth. So he wanted to be home soon so that he could maybe be there for the birth of his child. So we switched. It was great. I was like, I got the 6-month mark and he got what he wanted. He got to go home, see his baby born. It worked out great. Well, so now here we are 6.5 months into our deployment. Man, I'm counting down the days to my fucking R&R. It's literally days away. And so I started joking.
Short, were you? You were short.
It was short. And I started joking with the guys where I'd be like, every time we go out, like, watch my luck, man. This will be the day I get shot, which was funny because nobody was getting shot at that time. Everything was explosive. Everything was IEDs. So literally we hadn't had someone shot in a while. But that was kind of my running joke. It was like, I'm going to get shot today. So we find out we're going to do this week-long mission. And then we're going to take, 2 or 3 days off to rest and refit. And then we're going to go out another week-long mission. Well, the way it worked out was the first day of that second mission would be the day that I'm supposed to leave. So I'm not going to go out on the mission because I'm supposed to go out for 2-week R&R. So we just had to do this last mission, 5 days, have our 2-day break, and then I'm fucking out of here. So we do this mission, day 1, nothing comes of it. Day 2, nothing comes of it. Day 3, nothing comes of it. All the way to day 5. So it's literally, when I say literally, it is the last mission that I am on before my R&R. Because after this day, we'll have our 2-week break, our 2-day break, and then they would go out on the next mission, but I would stay back to go back to the rear for the R&R. We're sitting on the helicopters because we were doing air assault missions. Basically, we were looking for high-value targets. We were getting intel where they were. We would chopper in. We kick down some doors. We get the bad guys. Boom, bada, bing, done. Well, one of the things they teach you in the military is you don't do anything repetitively because it lets the enemy in on what you're doing.
Yep.
So this is day 5. We're sitting on the birds. They're like, all right, we got our target. We got a hit. We're up in the air. We're going. I'm on the door and looking out. And typically, I'd lean out, have the headphones on, pilot would be like, hey, 2 minutes. Would look out, be able to see a village, a town, whatever. And I look out and I don't see nothing, just hills. And so I'm like, all right, maybe it's kind of tucked away, can't see it. All right, 30 seconds. I look back out. I see nothing. I'm like, that's weird. Huh. And everybody's looking at me because based on what I see, it's the decision of like, are we going to hook up ropes? Are we going to fast rope down? Are we going to jump out? Like, what are we going to do? Are we going to land and just run out? And I'm just like, I don't know. I got nothing for you. I got no intel because I don't see anything. It's like, all right. And finally the pilots, they pull up and they're like, here, go, go, go. And I look out, we're on like the corner of a mountainside. I'm like, so you can't land because the fucking helicopter will roll over, but it's too short to do ropes. So I tell the guys, hey, we're going to jump. And I mean, that's airborne. That's what we do. So it's about 8-9 feet. Jump out. And in my head, right before I jump out, I'm like, okay, there's obviously no village here. So I was like, oh shit, maybe we found their tunnel system, right? Maybe we found their little hidey holes. And like, this is going to be a good day. We're going to take the fight to where these guys hide, which I'm like, what an idiot to give up their position. I jump out. I eat shit on the landing. The most unathletic, like I just sack of potatoes, bam, 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 and roll. And I'm like, one of those where you kind of pop up and you're like, I hope nobody saw that because they're going to give me so much shit for that. And I'm like dusting myself off and I can hear my other guys hit it. Boom, and I'm just like, oh, fucking, this is going to be a day. And I just remember, like, I see kind of a big outcrop of rocks. I'm like, all right, we kind of stack up and, pull security and get into cover. And like as I'm looking, like walking to that, I look back and I see the last guy come out and he kind of like twists, falls, and then just again eats it on the landing and then starts grabbing his leg. And I can see that he's screaming. Obviously, I can't hear it very loud, but I can see he's screaming, he's grabbing his leg, and I'm thinking, oh shit, he stumbled out the door, fucking broke his leg on impact. And I'm like, in my head, I'm already, because I was a sergeant at the time, so I'm like already thinking, oh God, fucking, I'm gonna have to do the paperwork and we're gonna have to call a 9-line. It's gonna be a whole thing, and now we're gonna be one man short, and we gotta get him out of here. And so I was also one of the combat lifesavers. So you're not a medic by no means, but you went through classes on how to do a splint, how to give an IV, how to suck your chest wound, all that stuff. Basic medic stuff. So I got my bag and I'm like, oh fuck. I start walking over, and right then is when the Black Hawk pulls away, and you start to hear bah, 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 and he said, I'm hit. And I'm just like, oh because I'm now fully standing out in the open. And I can see once the chopper pulled away and everything settled, I can actually see little puffs of dirt hitting all around him, which are the bullets impacting around him. Everything slows down because it felt like I know this happens in a split second. I know real time, this is a split second, but it felt like I had time to do math homework. Like I'm sitting there like thinking about vectors and going, okay, well, based on where it's coming from, I think the shots are coming from there. And there's cover, but there's like I'm all these things in a fraction of a second, because I can dive back to cover, but I also see these bullets hitting around him, and in my mind, I just know he is going to die if I leave him there. And so I make the decision, and I just sprint out to him. I grab him. We had these. That's the vest I was wearing. Obviously, it's IBA. You could see the last picture. You could see that we had like little handles on the back. So I run to him. I just grab his handle and I just start dragging him to what I can only hope is cover, because I wasn't really sure. But I start dragging him, and I remember I'm like holding my weapon in one arm and I'm dragging with the other arm. And I can't really shoot because I don't know which direction it is. I know, and I can hear my guys returning fire. They're doing what they need to do, which is what they're supposed to do. And I'm like, all right, I'll get him back to safety, and then I'll assess the situation. But in the process of dragging him, all of a sudden it goes from dragging, what would be a 200, 300-pound guy with all the equipment. It felt like I was dragging the Titanic behind me. And my brain again, all this, a million calculations in a second. Like I thought he got snagged on something. Like he was stuck on a rock or stuck on a branch or something. And so I'm like looking down, I'm pulling as hard as I can, and nothing. And I didn't see anything. So only thing I can think of is I slung my weapon behind me because I had it strapped. I slung it, hooked the other arm, and I just throw all my weight into it and start dragging him again. And I get him almost to the cover. And then again, it feels like now I'm like, I physically feel like I'm dragging the entire mountain behind me. And I'm thinking, my brain's like, what the fuck? Why is he so heavy? I know I'm not freaking out. I know I'm like, this is my second combat deployment. I've done this a million times. Like, what is happening? What I hadn't realized is that I'd been shot. So the first time I had been shot through the bicep, which had completely severed all the muscle in my bicep and went through and shattered the bone completely. I don't even know the name of bones, but the one between your shoulder and your elbow was pulverized. There was nothing.
Guys,
yeah. Oh,
I hate this, but they need us to wrap, man. This is really getting into the meat of it too.
Yeah. I mean, I've told the story a million times. It's out there. You can find
told part of this the last time. Yeah, I'm just so grateful you were able to. But yeah, it's like we're at the end of the show.
Shot 5 times. I got pulled out. Ended up in the hospital. Died. They brought me back. 44 surgeries later. I'm fine. That's a super quick wrap up.
Just grateful to have you here, man. Got to have you back again so we can finish this story and tell some more stories of what happened. Because we never really got into the healing process for you.
Yeah.
And
a lot
I want to get into that.
It's been a pleasure, Mike.
Always. Anytime you guys want me, I'm here.
Pleasure, honor, and I'm just so grateful to be your friend. I really am.
Feel the same, man. Feel the same.
Although I prefer my friends to have all their fingers.
Oh my God. Janelle, take us away, please.
Get us out of here.